Good morning and good afternoon, Europe. My name is Melinda Herring, and I am the Deputy Director of the Eurasia Center at the Atlantic Council. We are so privileged today to have three chairpeople from the Baltic states to give us their views on Russia. I'm joined by Laima Andreikine, the chair of the Foreign Relations Committee of the Parliament of Lithuania. Welcome to the Atlantic Council.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Reinhard Kohls, the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Parliament of Latvia. Welcome. And finally, Marko Mikkelsen, the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Parliament of Estonia. Okay, that was the hard part. I had to nail that. Okay, it's really a privilege to have you here. Welcome to the Atlantic Council. I have to say some obvious things, and then you're going to tell us more deep and profound things. But no one understands Russia better than the Baltic states. And I'm so glad that you're here. You may have realized that I'm supposed to be talking to the camera. Sorry, we'll have our conversation in just a minute. But I really admire and respect everything that these three governments have done in the last couple of months and with the Belarus crisis. No one better understands Vladimir Putin or his intentions, partly because of their long history. So we are so happy to have you here for your insights. It's a pivotal moment in the transatlantic relationship, and we really need to hear from you three. Few countries are as supportive of or as willing to lend direct support to Ukraine's fight against Putin than the three Baltic states. So we really look forward to hearing your insights. The Atlantic Council is proud to have a close relationship with all three governments and all three parliaments of the Baltic states, and we are always here to host you when you come to Washington. Before we begin, I want to encourage everyone who's watching online, thank you for joining us. It's really early. Get your coffee. This is going to be fun. Join our discussion on Twitter, and we're using the hashtag ACEurope. To join the conversation, you can drop questions into Zoom, or you can put them on Twitter. Now, I want to ask all three of you. Yesterday, you were in Washington on Capitol Hill speaking to the Helsinki Commission. What were your takeaways? What were the big arguments that you made, and any surprises from your time on Capitol Hill? Let's start with you.
Thank you, Melinda. Yes, yesterday we started with the hearing organized by the Helsinki Commission. And the title of the hearing was speaking for itself. Game changer, the Baltics under pressure. So, of course, we were speaking about our security situation in the Baltic region. We spoke about Ukraine. We spoke about US presence in our region. And I had to speak about China and Taiwan, because from our point of view, China is not only about trade. It's one of our security concerns as well.
Wonderful. Reinhards?
Well, I mean, it was, of course, we divided our responsibility so we can cover as much as we can. So for Lithuania, the responsibility is really talking about the rise of authoritarianism globally, not just Russia, China, and etc. For me, it fell under the scope for the hybrid threats, which is the most blurred area when it comes to security and defense, and particularly knowing our experience in the Baltic countries for the past 30 years since regaining our independence. That includes disinformation, malign activities, corrupt politicians, economic pressure as well, energy security, all that combined. And I think the Baltic countries have a vast experience on because, if the larger West is exposed to disinformation, let's say for the past 6 years or 7 years, when the realization becomes, more vivid than we have been exposed for the 30 years. And, we have accumulated the expertise, what we can do and how we should address these issues. And of course, I mean, the paramount discussion was on the dimensions of the change of the security and defense architecture that Russia is really trying to push, both with the war in Ukraine, but broadly as well. And we see it's not only one authoritarian regime bordering Baltic countries, it's Belarus as well. And as we all know, Belarus, in our view, has de facto become part of Russian Federation, particularly in the military dimension. And that requires reassessing already the defense plans that we're having. And I know that the Baltic Defense Plan, which has been activated in the past 2 weeks, it needs to be reviewed, and the deterrence needs to be reviewed as well, boosted. And I think that the biggest challenge we are facing right now, looking at what Russia is doing in Ukraine, and the weakest link is air defense systems.
Yep.
And this is something that when it comes to Baltic countries, we have none. Yes, we have the air policing that was throughout the years provided by NATO member states, patrolling the Baltic skies, but we don't have on the ground proper defense, air defense systems. And this is something that it's a costly thing to afford. And even though we are now way beyond 2% on defense expenditure, there's a lot of needs at the national level to improve. So with the air defense systems, this is our call for our transatlantic strategic partners, US, to get involved actively and find ways where we can actually already introduce some systems that gardens the skies above the Baltics.
Wonderful. That was so clear. Okay, so the Baltic states want air defense systems. Got it. Okay, Marko, tell us about your remarks on the Hill yesterday, and what more should NATO and the U.S. be doing in the Ukraine fight?
From yesterday, both from the Helsinki Commission hearing, but also meetings what we had in Senate and House of Representatives with our colleagues. Actually, the main takeaway was that there is very strong bipartisan support to us as allies, to NATO as well, and there is very strong understanding that we have to go beyond very sound declarative words that every inch of NATO territory is protected, of course, and defended. We have certain gaps in our defense posture in the Baltic states, in the region, on the eastern flank. And what we have right now, the major war against not only Ukraine, but major war against our democratic system, how we have built our security in Europe, and perhaps even wider than that. So we have to go to practicalities right now. Like Richard said, we have certain steps what we need to do commonly, and also with the help of the United States in terms of air defense, in terms of several other specific capabilities. But first and foremost, we have to understand that one of the reasons why we are in this situation is also not because what Russia has done throughout last 20 or 30 years. Don't forget that prior to Putin, we witnessed carpet bombings in mid-90s in Chechnya. I was a journalist that time. I covered the first Chechen war. I witnessed with my own eyes what Russia is capable to do against their own citizens.
Yeah.
So what we have done, we actually tried to appease every empire which never died in 1991.
Thank you so much. Let me ask you a follow-up question. Are you surprised? So the three Baltic states have been aware of the Russian threat for a long time, given your history, right? Are you surprised by the response now in Western Europe? Is it an overstatement, Marko, to say that Western Europe has finally woken up to the Russian threat?
Not yet.
Not yet? What do you mean?
Not yet. I guess there still is hope that we can somehow handle the situation in a way that, okay, let's try to calm down Russia in their aggression against Ukraine, maybe to find some kind of temporary solution but what I said at the beginning, the unity here in bipartisan unity in the United States, their unity is among allies is strong.
Yep.
We have to build on this now, solid strategy, how to work with together to actually to lead to the point, or to get to a point where actually the Russian Federation is not going to be any more threat, not only to us, but also to the entire world.
Absolutely. Laima, I want to thank you. Everything your parliament has done, everything your government has done, you're an inspiration to the world, especially on Belarus. You've taken in Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. We were honored to host her here. Well done. I wish my government were as responsive as yours. Could you say a little bit more? I think that Putin may get stuck in Ukraine, and this could be the end of the authoritarian moment. Could you reflect on that? What do you think?
I would like to add something to what my colleagues already said about, and what you started with, that we know a lot. We understand Russia. We know a lot about them, and I have to say that for years we were your whistleblowers, trying to explain to the West what are the real intentions of Russia. And there were not many political leaders in the West who were ready to listen to this. Now we see aggressive Russia, which invaded Ukraine. And we see, civilians. I mean, what's going on in that country? And it's not only from our perspective, it's not about Ukraine. It's not only about Ukraine's sovereignty. It's about us. It's about Europe. It's about you. It's about the world order we managed to create after the Second World War. And looking from our perspective, it's a new reality for us. And that is why we are switching, from the strategy of deterrence to the strategy of defense. And those are two different things. So in addition to US troops we already have in Lithuania, rotating battalion, combat ready, it's not enough. We need more persistent presence of the US troops in the Baltic region and in my country in particular. We need integrated air and missile defense system, as it has been already mentioned by my colleagues, and many other things. And when we speak about the game changer, it's part of this is situation in Belarus and around Belarus. You mentioned Svetlana Tsikhanovskaya. You know that she's in Vilnius, and her team is there. Russian Democrats, democratic opposition, and Belarusian democratic opposition, they were asking for the shelter in Lithuania, and we provided that shelter for them. But Belarus is already absorbed by Russia.
Yeah.
There is no sovereign Belarus anymore. And let's do not forget that we have unprecedented number of Russian troops on Belarusian soil.
Yep.
Lukashenko initiated his, fake referendum, I think orchestrated by Kremlin. And according to those amendments to the constitution, when they are adopted, neutrality of Belarus is gone.
Yeah.
Russians will be able to deploy nuclear weapons there. We will have official Russian military bases. And until now, we were saying, like we are, that we do not have a border with mainland Russia. We have a border with Kaliningrad district only, which is a bit more than 200 kilometers long. And now we will have additional 700 kilometer border with Russia. And that is going to be a Russia-NATO border. So it's a new reality.
Yeah.
And we feel also, challenged. So that is why we are trying to do everything possible to assist Ukraine.
Got it.
We cannot fail in Ukraine.
I agree with you 100%, Reinhard. Tell us, okay, so we're having arguments here right now, and I want the Baltic perspective on this. At this point, Vladimir Putin it looks like he's pretty stuck in Ukraine, right? He was not able to drive to Kiev and get rid of Zelensky in a few days like he thought he was. And they're not making progress pretty much anywhere. So we're having arguments in the think tank community and broader community. Where will Putin go next? Will he try to take on the Baltic states, which are NATO allies? Will he try to take on Georgia or Moldova? I personally don't think he's going to go after NATO. Well, what are your thoughts?
Well, this is precisely what Putin wants us to do, for our minds to be preoccupied on trying to analyze and understand what might be his next steps. As we all know, here in this room, we were preoccupied also with, when the talks and dialogues were on the table as well. What might Putin do? And honestly, the truth is very ugly. There was already pre-planned, pre-staged, everything that we've seen for the past 3 months. The whole thing from Russia's side was a circus, just to, twist around everything and so on. So what we have to do, actually, to put our all energy, is to actually look at the worst scenarios and be prepared. make all the necessary steps, preparationally steps, be it, tactical nuclear attack, be it chemical weapons attack, all of these, not just thinking, because all of these steps, knowing that Putin is, well, you cannot predict what his actions will be. And to trust any of his words or his, cronies, that's the least, to do. So therefore, I mean, what we have to focus as well, I think the mistakes were done, even though I admired the leadership that was shown by US, by UK, really mobilizing, assisting Ukraine, military equipment, financial assistance, putting together NATO as well. I admire all those things, but there were, and there are still, mistakes done when it comes to public diplomacy and communication.
Tell me what, I have some on my list. What's on your list?
Well, the one thing is that, for US, instantly, on the first day saying US troops will not be involved in whatsoever way in Ukraine. I mean, why the hell we have to say that? I mean, among ourselves, yeah, let's agree, and, we know the reasons and so on, but why to make it public? And this is, somebody saying as well, we should not make these steps because that will escalate. Hesitation is exactly what Putin wants to see. Whenever we hesitate, he acts. And that is, the modus operandi. So therefore, for us, it's really be prepared and ready on all fronts to defend and to deter. Not going out already presumably saying that, this is our limitations and so on. When it comes to nuclear weapons, well, I have to say that everything that is unfolding in Ukraine with Russian aggression, authoritarian regimes across the world are closely monitoring what the West is doing.
Sure.
And if we are saying right now, and the fear is of the potential tactical nuclear attack, and we hesitate, and we say, okay, this is it. This is the furthest we can go. This is something putting ourselves. That is carte blanche, for other authoritarian regimes to say this is the West limitations. These are that they have openly stated. So this is something that we should not be preoccupied on analyzing and thinking what might be Putin's next step. It's unpredictable. We can't actually predict what's going to happen. So therefore, the whole energy has to be put first, how to booster the assistance to Ukraine. Additionally, not losing the focus on how we can strengthen the eastern flank and the Baltic countries. Of course, here we are in the room. Of course, we're going to advocate for the Baltic region as well. But this is, the overall doing what we have to do right now, not rather being preoccupied, sitting in the rooms and in think tanks and etc. And what might Putin do next? This is exactly what he wants, that we are stiffed with our activities.
No, I think actually what he wants is us to not have courage and to tear ourselves apart internally about escalation. And I think it is smart, though, to be thinking about where he'll go next. I think we have to have those discussions. I think you're right, though, we should be
But that's
preparing.
what I was saying.
Yep.
Let's be prepared. Let's put on the table the worst scenarios. This is where he's ready to go. And let's start to talk about what we can do in order if one or another scenario is fulfilling.
I'm with you. I've been warning that the war's been coming for a long time. And I was told by lots of people that I was wrong, and I take no joy in being right. But I take your point. We should be preparing for the worst and hoping for the best. Marco, let's talk about nukes. So about 2 weeks ago, I was really worried. Vladimir Putin is not the same man that he was at the end of '99 when he came into office. You can disagree with that.
Absolutely.
But
this is the same person.
He's the same person. Okay.
Who was in Dresden also in 1980s.
Okay.
Nothing changed.
So I would argue that he's always been a cautious risk taker, but the behavior that we see in Ukraine is not the behavior of a cautious risk taker. And I think something changed. So he was a spy in Dresden, and he's always been paranoid, but he's even more paranoid and even more isolated as a result of COVID. So I was really worried about him using nukes. But then I started talking to people who study this and follow this, and they say he's really good at making threats, and he actually hasn't changed the nuclear posture or done anything beyond making threats. How do you assess his willingness to use nukes?
Firstly, I would like to also say a couple of remarks on your previous question about what he might do next. Yes, I agree that we have to actually go through all the questions, but we have to put as a priority what we will do next. Mm-hmm. Because this is exactly what has been the lack of our sort of policy, foreign policy, security, defense policy of collective West, let's say, because we have been on a path of appeasement for many, many years, and thinking only tactically how to calm down the situation, and maybe we can go back to business as usual, because there are a lot of interest in terms of economy and so on and so forth. But today we have to think what we should do and how we could build the strategy that we can one day not even think about that the leader of a country like Putin threatens us with the nukes. This is unimaginable in what kind of world we live. So we don't give in to this bluff. I don't think that he is ready to go as far as using even tactical nuclear weapon, as we have seen during Zapad exercises. Yep. They have used, let's say, on their tabletop exercises, nukes against Riga, against Warsaw, in order to escalate for de-escalation, yes. But we have to be very clear and sound, telling to both Putin, but also to the entire world that this bluff doesn't go through. And we have to show with our own action, both on diplomatic level, but also on level of deterrence policy in terms of how do we support right now Ukraine seriously with weaponry, with diplomatic efforts. But first and foremost, they must understand that there is no possibility that he can go away with this kind of threatening rhetoric.
Got it. Okay, so I have a last question. You are all sitting politicians. You all have good friends in Ukraine. If you are having a conversation with President Zelensky or his staff, and they're thinking about negotiations, the Russians and Ukrainians are negotiating right now, and we know that we know what the outlines of the deal look like. Zelensky's talked about NATO neutrality or freezing their NATO aspirations, but the real sticking points are Crimea and the Donbass. What advice would you give to President Zelensky and his team as they're trying to come up with a negotiating strategy?
Very briefly on the Russian negotiating team, which is led by the former Minister of Culture. Everybody understands that he is not the person to make decisions, and it's Putin. Yeah. They were not even they did not even manage to agree on humanitarian corridors.
I know.
So I think what Putin wants from those so-called negotiations to gain more time.
Okay.
But you mentioned my Ukrainian colleagues. We have to hear. President Zelensky's message was very clear.
Yep.
No-fly zone over Ukraine. And we know the reaction he received. But at the same time, I have to say that 4 parliaments of the EU member states, of the Czech Republic, and of 3 Baltic states, recently we adopted resolutions on no-fly zones over humanitarian corridors and nuclear facilities in Ukraine. There are 15 active nuclear reactors in Ukraine. And we know what Russians targeted when they invaded Ukraine. The first was Chernobyl nuclear power plant. The next one, Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. And they're planning to, target the third one.
Yeah.
We do remember Chernobyl disaster.
Of course.
And we learned lessons from that, I hope. And we have to find instruments to create security zones around those nuclear facilities. I think it's extremely important, not speaking about long-term perspective, but that has to be done now.
Great reminder. Thank you, Lema.
Well, I will be very brief. I don't think the West is in a position to actually consult Zelensky on what way to proceed with negotiations and talks. I think we have lost this moral ground, not securing the Minsk agreements, Normandy format. That was actually that led to Russia's invasion. That was never fulfilled and never actually followed by Russia in any place. Right now we see that ongoing discussions between Ukraine and Russia. I think it exclusively has to stay in that format. No intermediaries to be played into this. I know there is a lot of passion, like I will be the peacemaker and peace dealer and so on. We saw, from Israel, we see it from France, we see it even from Germany. Chancellor Scholz yesterday saying there's still a path for diplomacy to prevail. It's a long gone approach, and I think the wrong messages that are being sent, I think even for Ukrainians and Zelensky and his administration. How many times Macron has already had the telephone conversation? Today he's having, again, 1.5 hours. And again after the telephone conversation, having regret that there is no progress and he has received, let's say, slap in the face. So therefore, I think it's exclusively only for Ukraine and Russia to talk and actually set any conditions or formats. Any intermediaries, I think it will only complicate things and the talks. So for time being, I don't think that we are in a position actually to really consult what would be the best way and what conditions and so on. Ukrainians are sacrificing their lives not only for their sovereignty but for our freedom as well.
Okay, I can rephrase the question differently. Based on your experience and as experienced politicians, if President Zelensky called you, what advice would you give him? That's the question I'm looking for.
As far as what we have heard from his presentations, speeches to U.S. Congress or Bundestag or some other parliaments, the message is clear. Help us, we will fight. Yeah. What we see on the ground, there is no change from Russian side. Even at the time of those so-called negotiations, Russia is pulling up more troops on the borders or enforcing invasion, trying to win the better position for future negotiations. But to be honest, as you said as well, the situation is stalled, and in some directions, Ukrainians today are fighting back and fighting quite effectively back, with our help, by the way, as well, with this weaponry, what we supply to them. And we, first and foremost, we should listen what they are asking us, not advising them how they gonna live their lives in the future. Yes, they have very difficult choices right now, but one choice is total win. And we have to make sure that we are not end up in a situation that we appease situation down, and then in a few weeks' time, few years' time, we have another war. Yeah. This is what happened after Georgia. This is what happened after Chechnya, Syria. So maybe enough is enough.
Couldn't agree with you more. Now it's my pleasure to bring in some of my colleagues who also want to get a chance to chat with you. So I have 3 colleagues who will be joining us by screen. First is my colleague, hi Leah, and Leah is the Deputy Director of the Transatlantic Security Initiative, and it's part of our Scrowcroft Center. Leah, go ahead, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I think Melinda covered a lot of what I was planning to, so I hope this isn't too repetitive, but I did want to follow up, I think, on what we are thinking about here at the Scowcroft Center for Strategy and Security almost every day in terms of what escalation looks like. And as Mr. Cole said, Putin is trying to keep us guessing and we can't trust his words, but we also shouldn't only try to guess what he will do next, which I think is a really good recommendation. But how can we prepare for what I think is becoming a more likely action by Putin to maybe use chemical weapons in Ukraine to further target civilian centers and attempt to undermine Ukrainian resistance? How would each of you respond to this? And would this change the calculus about how involved NATO would be, maybe in terms of how NATO has so far denied President Zelensky's call for a no-fly zone?
Thank you so much. She wants to know about chemical weapons. Yeah. If Putin uses chemical weapons, does that change the scenario? Go ahead.
Well, I think in this kind of approach from the West, the reply on any indications and the threats, and if actively goes, what we have to say, what we did the same with the pre-invasion talks and dialogue with Russia, that we openly stated. When it comes to any renewed aggression against Ukraine, everything is on the table. And that is not going in specifics and so on. That is a clear message, and I mean even for Putin as well, knowing how far they're going to go, right? So if we're going to limit already ourselves and saying this is it, this is how far we're going to go. But if we say everything is on the table.
Yep.
Nothing is off the table.
Yep.
That was with the sanctions, and I mean, how impressive. I mean, Putin didn't expect, really didn't expect. And I think when it comes to these, mass destruction, weapons, potential use, the reply from the West should be everything's on the table when it comes to retaliation.
Okay, super. Marco or Laima?
Yeah, I agree.
Go ahead, please.
I agree
You
with
agree,
Richard.
you agree.
Not much to add.
Okay, Russia has used sort of probably chemical weapons in Syria.
Yeah.
They have used thermobaric ammunition in Ukraine. They have killed thousands of civilians, among them children. So what are we talking here? The war crimes happen every single day. What we, again, it's this is a situation where we think, okay, maybe this is going to be a game changer and helps Russia to achieve their goals if they go totally crazy, using chemical weapons. I don't think that this will put Ukrainians' resistance down. This will just create even more anger.
Yeah.
And readiness to fight back.
Yeah, that sounds right. That sounds right. Okay, our next question is from Dr. Fran Burwell. Hi, Fran. Good morning. She's a distinguished fellow in our Europe Center, and she's the senior director at McLarty Associates. Fran, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, and very good to see you all here in Washington. There have been several proposals for Ukraine to join the EU at this point, or to be offered membership, including by President Zelensky and by some of your politicians. Your countries have gone through this process. It's very complicated, it's lengthy, it's very rigorous. And you've also seen how countries can struggle with adapting to EU rules and upholding the standards that are expected in the EU. At the Versailles European Council, we had a recognition of the desire of Ukraine to join, but we did not have a membership perspective given. Do you think that Ukraine should be given a membership perspective at this stage? Is there some special category of membership that the EU should think about developing? What are your views on this question, membership in the EU?
Thanks, Fran. Go ahead, Laima.
Yes, thank you very much. I think it's a very good question. And all three parliaments of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, we stand for that Ukraine should be granted a candidate status. And from my point of view, I am former Minister of European Affairs in my country. So I know what that means to, this process of European integration. I think the granting candidate status to Ukraine, it's a political decision. Mm-hmm. And this decision has to be made. And that means that Ukraine will be able to start accession negotiations, but not during the war, after the war. So it will take time. But we have precedents in the European Union. When after the unification of Germany, Eastern Germany was integrated into the EU. And it took the process of the integration process from the political process took less than 1 year. So there are precedents, but we are in a new reality. And I think the political decision has to be made as soon as possible. And that would be a very clear message to Ukrainians who are fighting for their future.
Absolutely.
For their European future.
Absolutely. Let me ask you a follow-up, since you know the technical side of this.
Yeah.
I've been talking to some experts, and they told me that it takes about 10 years to bring a country into the European Union, and Ukraine has a real problem with its court systems. You know this just as well as I do. Is 10 years, is it realistic, or could it be sped up?
I think it could be. We should give a fast track to Ukraine.
Okay.
That is my position, and that is my understanding. And for our countries, it
7 years.
7 years.
So to prove we can do it even faster if we want.
Yes. But this homework could be done during the process of negotiations also. I mean, it's nobody expects that Ukraine will become EU member, in 1 year time. But what we need now to send a message to Ukraine and also to Russia, that Ukraine is under the umbrella of the EU. and we are ready to do everything what is possible, to assist them.
When will the decision be made?
I do not know. We do not have an answer. We know the outcome of the council mentioned by the lady who spoke. But I hope that we, at least our countries will be pushing this issue forward.
Wonderful. Marco.
This is actually a very good question and very good example. How did we were very much afraid not to provoke Russia? Mm-hmm. Please remember Bucharest Summit 2008. Another topic, NATO's map. What we have done during the last 14 years? Nothing. What Ukrainians have done, they have gone through revolution to dignity. They have fought for, their own country, for their freedom, for our freedom. And we were afraid, maybe if we go a bit too far, start to talk about NATO map, maybe this will somehow irritate Russia and they will do something. The same happened with EU. We started to talk about EU perspective 8 years ago, in 2014, after their revolution. And we were lonely voices within EU. Even today, week ago, when prime ministers got together in Versailles, it took several hours to say a few words that, okay, Ukraine has perspective. But why not to say, okay, we understand you can be right now candidate country and your track can be started from here. We understand that this will not be overnight, let's say. But if more than 80% of Ukrainians today say that they would like to see their own country within the EU, and more than 70% tell that Ukraine must belong to NATO, what kind of luxury we as democracies today have to say no to the people who would like to be part of a democratic free world?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Go ahead, Ray.
Yeah, just a few remarks. So on the, as Marco said, this has been a very, a hot topic within the EU before even the current situation, both with Balkan countries as well. Just shutting the doors in front of their noses and so on. That is also the question about EU's credibility and reputation altogether. Currently, with these circumstances, we see also with NATO as well. Baltic countries, we were calling, let's start to already at least to draft the action plan. I'm not saying approving, but drafting, the pathway towards. I mean, there's still hesitations. And I think what I really call for right now, we're working on the NATO strategic concept for 2030. And there is one clause that I think for the future potential member states, candidate countries, what we need to strip out is the clause where it comes, no candidate country can have some standing border issues unsolved. This is, we see the modus operandi for Russia. They have caused exactly these cases in Georgia,
of course,
in Ukraine. They know that this is already setting the legal limitations for NATO to actually open any talks and discussions. Even in the Baltic countries case, in 2004, Latvia had to give away part of our territory, a sacrifice, in order to become NATO member state. And that is exactly what Putin knows, that there are limitations. That will be always used as an argument that we would love to have this country as a NATO member state, but they have the issue with the border. And Putin knows these kind of, stalemate situations are blocking. So I think NATO needs to have a political decisions that we can actually accept candidate countries that have maybe, standing border issues and etc. So,
but Zelensky's given up on you guys. He's given up on NATO. He's sick and tired of you guys.
Well, I don't think it's towards us, Baltics.
Not you guys. No. But NATO. He's basically said, I've asked, well, and you guys aren't answering.
I cannot blame him. I totally understand. I mean, the frustration, the constant calls, be it the no-fly zone as well. I know the legal limitations again for certain member states on that. But the reaction, I know today actually, the announcement that there will be a new strategic alliance, military, Slovakia, Poland, Ukraine. everybody's as well questioning, is this a threat to the NATO? Well, I would say no, because we have seen in the past, last summer, AUKUS.
Yeah.
It's an alliance, you
Yeah.
know, that consists of 2 NATO member states with a third country as well. It is additional format of, you know, cooperation on defense.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, what they are suggesting, Poland, Slovakia, I applaud, yes.
If I may, your question was very nicely provoking, you know.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, Zelensky is not authoritarian leader. He's a great leader right now of great democracy, as it is Ukraine, where more than 70% of people think that their country in the future must belong to NATO. This is written in their constitution.
Yep.
So it's not cannot be kind of eliminated. This kind of idea, the wish just with one sentence, let's
Yep.
say, of a leader. And I'm not sure. We don't know exactly what is going on behind the sort of scenes right now. There are talks, as we know. Sullivan, Bennett, Patrushev, so on and so forth, and Lavrov also somewhere. But end of the day, there are people of Ukraine who will decide the future of their country.
Just
You nailed it.
to add, my understanding is Ukrainians will never give up on the top strategic priorities: membership in the European Union and membership in NATO. And I fully agree with my colleagues, it's not for Russia to veto any country's will to join one or another alliance. We are aware of the, you know, efforts to mediate the process, to you know, encourage or force Ukrainians to change their minds. But what is enshrined in the constitution of Ukraine, it is much more important than you know, what's going on now. And we will see that in the future. I fully agree that Ukrainians themselves will decide where their place is, rightful place.
I agree. I
Yeah.
agree. Great. I'm going to bring in our last colleague, Charles Litchfield. Hi, Charles. Good morning.
Hello. Good morning. Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, Chairwoman. Thank you for including me in this discussion. I work for the geoeconomics team, so my question will be about the sanctions. We've seen an unprecedented amount of sanctions, but Russia is still receiving about 100 million, hundreds of millions rather, of Western currencies every day due to its energy exports. I know that your governments favor a ban. I know that the Polish government favors a ban. But I'm asking you as parliamentarians who, because of your positions on the Foreign Affairs Committees, I imagine are in close contact with your European counterparts, I'm asking whether you think it is feasible that the EU moves faster to stop imports of Russian oil and gas, whether you think this is desirable, and whether you're starting to see a change of mind in some of your colleagues. I've seen that the chair of the German committee supports a ban, so I'm interested in what you're hearing, what you're seeing, and whether you think it's plausible. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Charles. Who wants to take that?
I'll start. Let's think about where was kind of, for instance, Germany's position 2 months ago on Nord Stream 2, or even on some other issues in regard of Russia, or on sanctions, on SWIFT. So there has been major change in a way how European countries address right now the major existential threat from Russia. Yes, more to be done. There are, you know, we have to close ports. We have to put certain the much wider trade embargo on Russia. But key element, and I agree with this, is to stop the flow of Russian fossil fuels to Europe. We understand that this is technically very difficult to achieve overnight, let's say, because of dependency of certain EU member states from Russian, specifically natural gas. But the will is there, and even aim is there to get rid of dependency by 2030 from Russian fossil fuels. This is accompanies, of course, with green on climate change policies and stuff like that. But But what is important today is that we have to move quickly and find at least the ways how we can freeze assets we pay for oil and gas we consume from Russia. And this is something where I know prime ministers who will get together this week, again at the end of this week, will discuss all of this.
Wonderful. Any other thoughts?
Well, I think the Baltic countries altogether are in line with how Marco described the readiness and willingness at the political level. Of course, what Marco mentioned, the member states that are highly dependable on the Russian energy supplies. I mean, the Baltic countries, yes, we are. I mean, there is no secret about that. We have actually made political decisions to speed up the interconnections with the Central Europe, as well look for the alternatives as well when it comes to LNG as well supplies. So in this regard, there's a big mobilization going on thinking really practically how we can, in a very short period, get rid of the well, I would say the needle of the Russian gas and oil.
Just to add something, in Lithuania we feel safe. We have our LNG terminal, and it helps a lot. But at the same time, of course, we were against Nord Stream 2, and we were very outspoken on about this for years. We supported your country's position on Nord Stream 2 project as well. We fully understand that Germany is very much dependent on supplies from Russia. Italy is another country which depends a lot. And we were together in Rome, meeting our colleagues, chairs of the foreign affairs committees there. And we listened to their arguments, but nevertheless, what is more important today? And I think the time came to really act and maybe to sacrifice something
But this is
in order to have peace in Europe and to stop this bloody war.
Yeah, but this is again another major topic where for decades Russia started to push this needle into our body, late 60s. Willy Brandt's Ostpolitik. This was beginning of this. And actually throughout even last 20 years, there has been the kind of situation 2006 when Russia cut off gas supply for Ukraine to Europe. And Europe said, okay, energy security is important, let's start to diversify our sources. And what happened? Nothing happened. There was just Nord Stream 2 started to be built, Nord Stream 1, of course, and here we are. And this is where the immediate change is difficult, but at least there is strong political will present, what we witness right now in Europe, to turn away from this dependence.
Well, short period inconvenience is not comparable to the suffering of Ukrainian people. I think if we put in these scales, I mean, at the EU level, we have the energy union, right? It's an energy union, so the market. The calculations are that if we cut off 100% the supplies from Russia, it's doable. It's doable. We see the efforts done by the EU and US to find already alternative supply chains. Be it, Israel is ready to supply gas to Europe, Japan, Qatar. There's a lot of alternatives, and the question is how to get as many, potential exporters on board with us that are sharing. Actually, it is question of values as well, and then also ready to diverse. So I think if there is a political decision, and it has to be at the highest EU level, it cannot be, one country announces we're off. It's not going to work because the tentacles of Gazprom and etc. they're across Europe, owning the interconnector infrastructure, gas storages, and etc. And this is something that we've been calling again for years on these dependencies and etc. And right now before the Russia war in Ukraine, everybody was really focused on Fit for 55, 2030, change to alternatives and etc. And I think for the time being, there will be adjustments in these targets for objective reasons. And we see, I mean, for Germany, this ill decision, well, that was after the Fukushima, the nuclear power plant disaster, when they made this decision to get rid of the nuclear power altogether. I think at some point Germany even has to think. And we see that, there's also the issue on if it's the nuclear energy, the materials. They are, 80% comes from Russia.
So what happens when you make this argument in Rome, when you say there's going to be short-term pain, but we have to do this, and short-term pain is worth it for this, if we can end the suffering of the Ukrainian people? Are they sympathetic to that argument?
Well, it takes time to convince, and it's not just emotional arguments, it's the practical arguments as well. And I'm really pleased, our visit to Rome and meeting. I mean, beforehand, there were, not that hard position and so on. And what we saw, the willingness actually to listen to what we have to say, and also take into and convert it in practical.
But that was 8 days prior, 24th of
Yes.
February.
Yeah, but still, there were indications already.
So you guys need to go back to Rome. You're ready to go back to Rome.
No,
Not
we
only.
are. We are continuing in this format to travel to our partner countries as well. The next, we're planning to go to Spain as well. And this is, this is the way of working. And, our visit at the capital as well.
Good.
I mean, if I was the one going and so on, I don't think the weight would be as much as when three of us
Or together.
yeah.
Absolutely.
And what we are saying, it's not something, the scenario we have pre-written. I mean, it's just naturally the common understanding
Sure.
of the threats and challenges that we are facing.
Sure. We have danced around a very important issue. We've danced around the no-fly zone. So here in the United States, and the answer from the Biden administration is no, and the answer from NATO is no. And I think you probably all disagree with that decision. So my first question is, do you support a no-fly zone? Do you support a limited no-fly zone? Will it cause Russia to escalate? I'm going to let Marco go first.
Yeah, I would be very careful to say no to options, what we have in our possible toolbox as international community. Think about 141 countries in General Assembly of the United Nations said that Russia is aggressor state. This black and white situation. So, and what we called from our parliament actually we called for diplomatic efforts to think about what we can do commonly to save people, human lives.
Yep.
I think yesterday we heard that congressmen and senators, we were very moved seeing that movie, what Zelensky put up during his presentation of many of atrocities what we have seen so far already in Ukraine. Now, how do we can say and think that, okay, one country with nuclear weapons has exclusive right to kill people?
Yeah.
Do we agree? And, our voters come and ask us what we can do. And I think so. The right thing is that we say there are all options possible. Let us just think about what we can do in limited terms, how to save people, how international organization can be involved in that. But please don't tell that we are afraid of Russia.
So is that a yes on a limited no-fly zone, or is that a yes on a full no-fly zone?
I think that
Anything that saves lives.
anything what saves lives and anything where we can agree upon.
Okay. Please.
Melinda, on the 4th of March, our Committee on Foreign Affairs, we adopted a statement, and that was on no-fly zones over humanitarian corridors and nuclear facilities, as I already mentioned. Because, it's difficult to accept, it's impossible to accept that in the 21st century, in the very center of Europe, civilians do not have a secure passage from the war zones.
Yeah.
And women and children are attacked and killed. So what we are for then, we politicians, what our diplomats are for, what our defense alliance is for, if we cannot, save the lives of those innocent people. And whatever would work. Your question was for limited, no-fly zones, or the no-fly zone which should cover the entire territory of Ukraine. Anyway, but we have to work on this, and again, time is pressing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And also, once again, about those nuclear facilities, security zones around them on the ground, and no-fly zones over them.
I couldn't agree with you more. The issue that I'm really worried about right now is refugees. So there's more than 3 million refugees, and if the situation continues as it is now, it could go up to 10 million, right? That's a huge number. It looks like Poland has absorbed the bulk of the refugees.
We have refugees in Lithuania already,
So-
and number is growing, and they are coming, new refugees are coming every day. Most of them are women and children.
Yes.
So we try to integrate them. And the solidarity of people is amazing. During the very first week of the Russian aggression against Ukraine, people donated 19 million USD.
Wow.
The government allocated 15 million,
Wow.
and people collected 19 million
Wow.
for the Ukrainian army and for those refugees. So what we are doing, we are bringing refugees from Moldova to Lithuania also. And we trying to to organize everything. Children are going to school. Lithuanian businesses they employ Ukrainians, and a lot of sympathy and a lot of solidarity with those people.
You guys are a light to the world. I hope you realize that. Thank you for all that you're doing. Gentlemen, what are your governments doing? I'm less familiar with refugees.
Well, it's absolutely, there is state programs already adapted, the plans as well. It's the municipalities' involvement, it's the government institutions. Well, we're ready. So the last one that you need to have a roof over the head, work or education as well. What I would actually argue and invite for the international community, let's not make this as a refugee situation with the kind of end result of being integrated parts that for the rest of their lives they associating their lives with whatever country is hosting them.
Yeah.
I think with the prime example is in the past days 340,000 Ukrainians have returned
Yep.
to Ukraine to take up the arms and protect their country. And we see from Ukrainians themselves, they're not asking, social benefits and etc. They say, look, I just need to safe environments,
Exactly.
roof over my head, for children the possibility to continue education, work to be done, and as soon as I can return back, I'm ready to do that. So I would rather talk not about the full integration,
Yep.
I would say the social economic inclusion.
That's my experience too. I've been talking and working with a lot of folks, and they want to go back to Ukraine as soon as it's safe. They need internet and Wi-Fi and a computer so that their kids can stay in school.
Exactly.
Go ahead, please,
Yeah,
Mark.
but we have to also think that this conflict is not over tomorrow.
Yes.
And this is part of Putin's strategy, as he used it bombing Aleppo, Syria, and causing influx of refugees to Europe. Today in Estonia we have roughly 30,000 refugees from Ukraine. That would be, if comparable per capita numbers, that would be 5 million refugees in the United States.
Wow.
The same size, sort of. It is tremendously difficult. Because it has rapidly grown these numbers, and definitely there should be a response not only from single member states of the European Union, for instance, but that should be sort of common approach, because as you mentioned, those numbers could go up many millions.
I'm very worried that we're going to see that high end if Putin continues the Mariupol, the Aleppo-style tactics in other cities as well. But my government needs to be doing more. Our refugee and visa system is completely broken. I know hundreds of Americans who want to invite Ukrainians into their homes, and we can't get them visas. It takes 9 months to get a visa in Warsaw right now at the U.S. Embassy. So we have to fix our system so that more Americans can bring Ukrainians in their homes. But thank you for all you're doing. I enjoyed this conversation very much. Good luck with the rest of your trip. You're always welcome at the Atlantic Council. Thank you for your leadership, and I mean it. You guys are a light to the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very nice.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. Please keep your eye on our website. We'll have more fabulous events, and we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you very much.